Juan Flores, California Bandito, by David Smith. Early in the morning the posse stopped for breakfast at Refugio to rest and feed their horses. This was the main house of the Rancho San Joaquin, which was southwest of the present city of Santa Ana and 18 miles from San Juan Capistrano. It was owned by one of California's finest old dons, Jose Andres Sepulveda, described as a princely character and genial host. Gathered about the Don's adobe buildings were dozens of vaqueros, servants, Indians, and Mexicans. Among them was Chola Martina, Flores' girlfriend. Leaving their guns on a table in an outbuilding, the posse members sat down to breakfast. Jose Sepulveda also warned Barton that Flores had a large force of 50 or 60 men who were well armed and mounted. He advised the sheriff against going further, since the posse was so pitifully outnumbered. Also that Barton should send back to Los Angeles for more men and wait till they arrived before continuing after the outlaws. Barton still wouldn't listen. He told Sepulveda he could handle the gang and ordered his men to saddle up and ride. Barton believed the number of men in Flores' gang had been exaggerated by hysterical victims. They left the ranch and started for San Juan Capistrano. The posse had ridden 12 miles when a man rode out of the tall mustard weed, took a shot at them, and galloped up the road. The posse chased after him. This was 15 miles north of San Juan Capistrano. The exact location was about 300 yards southwest of where the Laguna Freeway now crosses the San Diego Freeway. About 20 manias rode downhill, tracking the posse. Thanks to Chola, the posse's guns were useless. To the outlaw gang, it was like shooting fish in a barrel. Barton, Little, Baker, and Daly were killed. Frank Alexander and Alfred Hardy were behind the main body. As they galloped up, they saw the situation in time, wheeled their horses in the road, and fled in the direction of Los Angeles. They were chased by members of the gang all the way to the Rancho San Joaquin. Sheriff Barton and deputies Little, Baker, and Daly became the first lawmen in Los Angeles County to lose their lives in the line of duty. When news of the Barton massacre reached Los Angeles, the people were shocked. Many people believed Flores and his Las Manias were on their way to Los Angeles to murder white people. A committee of safety, a committee of vengeance, and a foot patrol were organized. Andres Pico also requested backup from soldiers at Fort Tejon and provisions from the cavalry post at San Diego. They also organized parties of mounted rangers and tucked away the women and children in Armory Hall. Andres Pico and Tomas Sanchez asked for volunteers to capture and punish the assassins. A posse of 51 men was organized by Pico. They consisted of Mexicans and Americans who were Los Angeles shop owners and vaqueros from some of the local ranches. Palma Indian leader Manuelito Cota of Temecula joined the posse too. Manuelito recruited 43 Native Americans for the task. Palma scouts ventured ahead of the posses to look for clues as to where the bandits might have fled. Jose Andres Sepulveda at Rancho San Joaquin let the people in charge in Los Angeles know that they were organizing for defense, not attack, until Pico could assemble help. Information had also come from Juan Forster that he felt the Capistrano mission could be held for a while unless the outlaws made an all-out assault. James Thompson, who became sheriff with the death of Barton, led a heavily armed 14-man posse to collect the bodies for burial. When Thompson's posse arrived at the ambush, they found what was left of Sheriff Barton and the 3 deputies. Their bodies had been mutilated and the remains scattered. They also saw that they had been fired upon at close range after they were dead, as though someone had tried to kill them over and over again. They had also been stripped of their valuables, including their boots. The grisly remains were removed from the road and taken home to Los Angeles, where they were paraded through the streets. The mutilation of the bodies was the crime, uniting all of the people of Los Angeles in the capture of Juan Flores and Las Manias. After the funeral, Pico took his posse and started after Flores. 3 other posses followed within the next few days. 50 dragoons also came from Fort Tejon and took up positions in the San Fernando Pass and Simi Valley Pass. The Palma Scouts discovered the Las Manias were hiding out in Santiago Canyon, around Saddleback Mountain in present-day Santa Ana. It wasn't an easy area to access, even on foot. The California Rangers, led by Pico and Sanchez, surrounded them. Some shooting back and forth commenced, and some of the banditos were captured, but some also escaped. The El Monte boys and Pico's posse surrounded the area and hunkered down to wait for morning. During the night, Flores, Daniel, and a few others tried to escape. Flores and Daniel blindfolded their horses and in the dark rode over a precipice and very noisily fell right into the Almani boys' camp. They were quickly captured, very happily, by these ex-Texas Rangers and tied up. Extra sentries were posted and the camp went back to sleep. Flores Peak in the Tucker Wildlife Sanctuary is named for Juan Flores for his fall. When they woke up in the morning, their prisoners were gone, along with two of their best horses. They tied Juan and Pancho back to back, and they'd simply untied each other. Everyone was very upset, and Pico hung Juan Silvas, El Catabo, and an infamous Sonoran, Guerrero Ardilero, whom he had seized the day before. He hanged them in Precito Canyon. The tree is still standing, located about 2 miles south of what is now Irvine Park. The Almani boys hung 9 men, including Jose Santos, Diego Navarro, Pedro Lopez, and Juan Valenzuela. Andres Pico sent for reinforcements, and shortly after his supply of guns, ammunition, and men were replenished, he continued the pursuit of the banditos. Mounted ranger bands fanned out from Los Angeles, El Monte, and San Bernardino. For 11 days the posse searched the canyons and houses from San Juan Capistrano northward along the Los Angeles River, the San Gabriel Valley, Coanga, and Simi Pass. Los Manias split up and traveled north. It was surprising they didn't go south since the Mexican border was so close. They were killed or captured in various groups of 5, 10, or 20. 119 men and 4 posses were involved in the search. Some members of the gang got as far as San Buenaventura, where they were captured after a gun battle and hung. This included Jesus Espinosa, one of the leaders. Juan Flores made it all the way to San Fernando Mission in the San Fernando Valley. He was nursing a wounded arm. He stole a horse and headed west to Simi Valley Pass, where he was captured by dragoons from Fort Tejon. Flores was taken into Los Angeles, where he was to be held for trial. In the first couple of weeks of February 1857, on some days businesses in Los Angeles were closed. Judge Jonathan R. Scott led a vigilante committee and held court on the veranda of the Montgomery Hotel. The public didn't trust the justice system and were in charge of the verdicts for these criminals. There were 52 suspects in the Los Angeles jail. Some of them who were accused of attempted murder or stealing horses were handed over to the authorities for a proper trial. Each individual who was accused of murder was put in front of the crowd in the street. Judge Scott, the chairman, announced the man's name and called upon the mob for its decision. "Hang him," a voice would shout. "Gentlemen, you have heard the motion," Scott said. "All those in favor of hanging will signify by saying aye." "Aye," repeated the crowd. Without evidence, accusers, or testimony, the trial was over. The prisoner was taken forcibly from jail, marched to the gallows on the hill above, and hanged. Of 11 of the men hanged, 3 were not even known by name. It was later discovered that 3 of the men hung had not been part of the gang at all. The mistake was regretted, but nothing must stand in the way of justice. The men were executed at Fort Moore Hill, above the plaza in Los Angeles. Fort Moore Hill began as a barricade overlooking the small town of Los Angeles in 1846 during the Mexican-American War. It was added to but never finished in 1847. The Moore name came from Captain Benjamin D. Moore of the 1st Dragoons, who was one of 22 Americans killed at the Battle of San Pasqual on December 6, 1846. After 1853, it became a public playground, a beer garden, a roadhouse, the prestigious Banning Mansion, a cemetery, a high school, and then headquarters for the Los Angeles Unified School District. In 1949, most of the hill was bulldozed for the 101 or the Hollywood Freeway. There is a wall commemorating the raising of the American flag and a reminder of what once was. Juan Flores was saved until last. Behind bars, Flores was a model prisoner, calm in the face of certain death and courteous toward curiosity seekers. He parried their questions nicely. When asked what a thief's life was like, he replied good-naturedly, "Become one and see." On February 14, 1857, Valentine's Day, the vigilante mob marched on the jail, easily overcame the guard, and proceeded with Flores to Fort Hill. 4 military companies, led by Twist, Farragut, Pico, and Stanley, escorted him through a quiet throng of 3,000 observers. Most of the residents of Los Angeles County were in attendance. Flanked by 2 priests, Flores strode up the hill with firm steps, still looking as composed as anyone in the crowd. He was a young man of pleasing countenance. There was nothing in his appearance to indicate the formidable criminal he had proved himself to be. His arms were tied to his body, and he ascended the steps. He asked to speak. The crowd fell silent. He said he was ready to die, that he had committed many crimes. He had no ill will against any man. He hoped no one would bear ill will against him. He repeated he was ready to die. He gave instructions for his burial to some people standing nearby whom he recognized, and then asked that his face be covered with a white handkerchief, and it was. Alfred Hardy, one of the two survivors of the Barton posse, placed a noose around Flores's neck, and the hanging rope was William Little's lariat. The plank under him dropped away. His body swung from the noose. The fall was shorter than planned, and the rope was a bit too long. After a gruesome 6-minute struggle, it was over. Finally, the limbs were still. The body hung for an hour and was taken down. Juan Flores was only 22 years old when he died. Pancho Daniel, Flores's partner, was captured on January 19, 1858. He'd made it past the posses and was finally captured near San Jose, almost a year after Flores was hung. He was wearing Sheriff Barton's silver-mounted belt. Daniel was returned to Los Angeles and was put on trial. He had very smart lawyers, and after several months he was granted a change of venue to Santa Barbara, where he'd get a fair trial. But in the morning on November 30th, 1858, his body was found hanging from a beam across the gateway of the jail yard. More vigilante justice. After Sheriff Barton was killed, Andres Fontes, having accomplished his purpose, severed his connection with Flores before they left San Juan Capistrano. He hurried away with several of the horses and other spoil taken from Barton and the posse and went to Baja California. Solomon Pico, another bandito and a nephew of Andres Pico, shot and killed Fontes down there. Chico Contreras was the only one of the gang leaders who escaped execution. He was captured, made a full confession, and was then deported to Mexico. More than 100 of the gang members were either captured or killed. Chola Martina grew old at the Barul Adobe. She was never charged with anything she allegedly did for Juan. She died at the San Juan Capistrano mission. I like to think her and Juan found each other and are now together for eternity.